Greetings, everyone. DFG here, Gideon's Flight. Hey, guys, just want to take a minute of your time and revisit a topic that you'll hear me revisiting, all the way through the 2020 elections and probably even beyond. And some of you guys probably say already, DFG going back into this reparations conversation, and you would be absolutely correct. I bring it up today because Dan Calloway has a video, a documentary that's come out. And again, he's talking about who's responsible for slavery. And, I have a lot of respect for a lot of the work that Dan Calloway has done. I would even credit him, for this. You know what I'm saying? For this Webster 1828 dictionary. Because he was one of the first people who brought it to my attention, in terms of the definition of an American, what an American was, how American was defined back in the early 1800s, which was Aboriginal or copper-colored, people here in the United States who are now being called, Europeans. So I have respect for Dan Calloway, most of his stuff. But where I draw the line with Dan Calloway is when Dan Calloway gets into this, we're not entitled to reparations conversation and solely want to base it on who owned or who did not own slaves. And, where no one will dispute that there were blacks and Native Americans, so-called blacks and Native Americans who would have owned slaves. But that type of slavery was probably more like indentured servitude. Not all of it, but mostly it was that way because a lot of the Native Americans bought their relatives. They purchased their relatives as slaves to be able to free their relatives from the aggressive or oppressive slavery that was in the southern states in particular. And the same thing with wealthy blacks. You know what I'm saying? Mulattoes, example, would have bought, their slaves, from other slave owners, their children or relatives. Again, not all, but some. But even giving that position a credit, and I do give that a credit. That's why I brought it up, to be transparent. But to try to capsulize a marginalized reparation or to try to destroy the argument for reparation by saying other people had slaves other than the majority of the slave owners who we know were Europeans, it's a little bit disingenuous in my personal opinion. But again, even if we decided to say, okay, well, let's park the reparations conversation on the sideline as we talked about slavery. Can we now get beyond that and say, okay, what happened after slavery? Did anything systemically happen to people of color, black people, after slavery? After 1865, did anything systemic happen that would have held so-called blacks back or limited their accessibility to wealth, to economics, to land, all those things that you need to pursue, to be prosperous? Okay, were there any intentional programs put in place? Because if there were any programs put in place, then we right back where we started with reparations. And I will tell you there were many institutionalized programs put in place. We talked about the pig laws, the vagrant laws. We talked about the sharecropping program. Most of you guys know it. When you hear people talk about my ancestors were sharecroppers, they kind of talk about that almost like in this antebellum, away in Dixieland kind of foolishness. And that was the farthest thing from the truth. There's a movie called Mudbound. Mary J. Blige stars in this movie. She does an excellent job as a mother of married to a sharecropper. And that movie gives you a true depiction of what sharecropping looked like for people of color. It was just slavery by another name, guys. So when you start looking at the sharecropping program and how they put us in perpetual debt and continual debt, forced our people after slavery back onto the same plantations with, again, vagrant law saying that if you didn't have a job, then that was against the law, then you were arrested, and then you could be leased by your former slave master back to the plantation from which you were supposedly liberated from. And then the process starts all over again. And again, look up slave sharecropping, because I don't want to take up all of my time explaining something to you that I know you guys are very intelligent enough to go out and look at. And I would tell a lot of you guys in my listening audience, at least the ones who don't mind doing research. You ought to go in and look at sharecropping. You ought to go in. Don't just Don't let people just give us words and say, well, they were sharecropping. Yeah, that's right. Well, do you go back and do some investigation around sharecropping? What were the benefits of sharecropping? Was sharecropping a fair deal? And we'll look at it in its fullness. I'm sorry. And that's with anything, but in sharecropping for one. I'll go back again. Look up vagrant laws, pig laws. Go back and look at, again, the sharecropping programs. Go back and look at why was Reconstruction put in place in the South in the first place. Now, because Reconstruction sounds like a great program. We're going to go down, we tore the South up because of the Civil War. Now we're going to go back and we're going to reinvest in infrastructure. And, and it just sounds like such a pretty word. But where there is some truth to what I just stated, there's a horrific, ugly side on the other side of what I just stated. Because right about 1874, about 9 years after Reconstruction had supposedly been in place, and you had black sheriffs and politicians and business people, etc., America did what America is very well known to do. If there's a guy who, and I won't quote his name, but he always says, he said, when white people get finished with their tools, they break them. And so in other words, when the whites up north were done with the whole war and did want to wash their hands with the residue of the Civil War, they pretty much said, okay, all that stuff we did down south, to hell with that. Let's pull our troops out and let's lead those Southerners to those who are best qualified to supervise those Southerners. In essence, the same slave aristocracy that was there before the Civil War. And, and you can imagine what those people's attitudes were towards our people after 1874. And, and I bring this to your attention. It's a brief history, but I think it's an important history. I think you need to know that. I want you to go look up and investigate and find out. So what is the Reconstruction Act? What happened after the Reconstruction Act? Why did Reconstruction end down south? Because you're going to find there was a lot of backroom deals. And at the end of the day, white America, as always, when it finished with its tools, it broke it. In other words, it left us to the mercies of some of the most racist, vicious, bigoted systems and programs in the history of this country. And not only that, but I want to share with you just some of the other things. Because a lot of you guys, you might think that, well, blacks just sat down and, we didn't fight back, we didn't push back. I heard this idiot, I won't tell you his name, but some people call him, oh boy. He always talk about the elders, tell you don't trust your elders, that guy. So if any of you guys know anything about black platforms and a particular black person who has a black platform who tells you that your ancestors and you shouldn't trust anybody over 45, that they weren't shit, he's an idiot because he wasn't there. I was there as a kid and I saw the hardships of my parents and they fought hard to push civil rights. They fought hard to give our children here today, even though it's a horrible system that they're in terms of having to continue to fight and get shot and abused, like Atiana and other loving, beautiful sisters and brothers of ours. They're still getting victimized by this bigoted system, but it was a worse system for them and for those who were before them, and that's just an absolute fact. And for anybody to marginalize that or to disrespect that, they should not be given your attention, including that fella, who I think is two people pretending to be one person, in my personal opinion. All right, again, I don't know why I'm so tempted to call it out, but and again, he's like Dan Calloway. I agree with some of the things he talks about, but some of the things he talks about, I think, is just sheer buffoonery, and I think it's self-serving. Okay, all right, I'll leave it alone. But let's get into. I'm so sorry. Let's get into some of the things that happened after, not only Reconstruction, but that our people sit down. Or were there other things that happened against our people to put us in a situation where we are today and why we are demanding reparations and why we should continue to demand reparations beyond the question of the slave question, okay? Let's go. Now, this is some of the riots I want to tell you about, all right? And I want you to check this out. And these are riots that happened, I guess you would have to call these post-Civil War riots, okay? And here they go. Say post-Civil War and Reconstruction period. You had 1866. Let me see how many these I can get. The New Orleans riot. '66, the Memphis riots. It was mostly ethnic Irish against African Americans. Okay, the Irish people attacked African American people. The Pulaski riots, whites against black. That was 1868. 1868, St. Bernard Parish massacre. Whites attacked blacks. The Opelousas, Louisiana massacre. Whites attacked blacks. The Camellia race riots. Whites against blacks. The let's see, it go down some more. The Eutaw, it's spelled E-U-T-A-W massacre. Whites against blacks. That's 1870. Here's another one. Federal troops. Let me go. Let's see here. The Meridian race riots in 1871, whites against blacks. All right. The Los Angeles anti-Chinese riots. Okay, that was mixed Mexican and a white mob killed 20 Chinese people. Okay, all right. Okay. Then we had the Colfax, Louisiana, white Democrats against black Republicans. Vicksburg, Mississippi riot, whites against blacks. The Battle of Liberty Place in New Orleans, after contested gubernatorial election, Democrats took the state building for 3 days, killing all the blacks, shooting them down right outside of the state building. Again, that was for the Battle of Liberty Place in New Orleans. Then you got the Coshahara massacre, white Democrats against black Republicans. The Yazoo, Mississippi, that's 1874. 1875, Yazoo City, Mississippi, white against blacks. Clinton, Mississippi, white against black. Statewide violence in South Carolina, 1876, whites against blacks. 1876, the Hamburg Massacre in South Carolina, white against blacks. Then you got the Pittsburgh riot, whites against blacks. You got the New Orleans, okay, let's go. You got the Omaha race riot. 10,000 white people stormed local courthouse, beat and lynched Joe Coe, alleged to have raped a white girl, okay? Then you've got, two groups of Irish Americans arrested after fighting following a ballroom ball. Okay, that's not a riot. You got the 1895 New Orleans dock workers riot. And I can go on and on and on. You got the Atlanta riots in 1906, the Bellingham riots in Washington, the Springfield riots in 1908. Okay, you got the East St. Louis riots, where it says an African American man was rumored to have killed a white man. Violence against African Americans continued for a whole week, resulting in an estimated 200 dead African Americans for supposedly killing one white man. And again, I can go on and on. 1819, Elaine, Arkansas riots. 1919 is Washington, D.C., Jenkins County riot, Chicago riot, Baltimore riot, Omaha, Nebraska riot, which was a hundreds of people. Charleston, South Carolina, Longview, Texas riot, Knoxville, Tennessee riot, 1820, O.C., Florida riot, the Tulsa, Oklahoma riot, we know about that in 1821, Black Wall Street, Rosewood riot in 1923, another one that was 1921 was Tulsa, Black Wall Street. Then you had Rosewood in 1927, Little Rock riot, and then you had the Watsonville, California riot, the Harlem, Manhattan, New York riot, Detroit riot in 1943. And this riot was given an example. In late June, a fistfight broke out between an African-American man and a white man at an amusement park. The violence escalated from there and led 3 days of intense fighting in which 6,000 United States Army troops were brought in. The result, 25 African-Americans dying along with 9 whites, okay? And then you got the Birmingham riots of 1963. We all know about those with Bull Connor. Then you got the Rochester race riots in 1964. And again, I can go on and on and on with this. So when you talk about why are all these attacks against people of color, black people, why? To hold them back, to make sure they never experience the American dream, to make sure that they continue to perpetuate the American nightmare. And so Dan Calloway and all you other guys, who are talking all of this talk in terms of why blacks shouldn't be getting reparations. Some idiot, I think it's called I want to say it's the Woodstock Institute, claimed the same stupid pit. Well, black people had businesses, and why do black want reparations from their enemies? They could, they had businesses, and they did. Yeah, they had businesses. Yes, they had progressive cities, but those cities were attacked and burned down to the ground. See, he left that part out. He talks about the black empowerment aspect of it, but he don't talk about the devious and murderous behavior by whites against blacks that have created the wealth gap and the poverty situation that exists today. Now, those are facts. Scripture says there's a violence in heaven, and the violent taking it by force. Our reparations are due. Reparations now, reparations forever. No reparations, no vote. Bye now.